In 1991, the US Special Operations Command decided they needed a new handgun, specifically, an offensive handgun weapon system. They listed several requirements for this gun, including being reliable, being able to be suppressed, and being chambered in .45 ACP. There has been a long existing subset of firearm owners that claim .45 ACP is the best round ever. Usually, that statement is followed up by why the 1911 is the greatest gun ever made. Thankfully, I think most people have realized that the 1911 is outdated compared to most modern handguns. But is there a case for the .45 ACP? The Mark 23, the gun that won the 1991 offensive handgun trials, uses .45 ACP. And through testing it proved itself to be very reliable. So how practical is this modern .45 as a primary weapon? Once again, we'll be using Ready or Not as our testing grounds. The game doesn't have the Mark 23, because it has something better. By all accounts, the USP-45 is an improved version of the Mark 23, so we'll be using that. Does the .45 ACP have the stopping power to take out murderous suspects? Or is it doomed to be the round associated with the fudds at the flat range? And is the Mark 23 SOCOM, and by extension the USP, the ultimate suppressed .45 ACP handgun?
Hands up, do it now!
.45 ACP hits harder than 9mm. No one can dispute that. One reason for this is that the .45 ACP is larger. This means that an operator should theoretically require less rounds on target with .45 to stop a threat, but it also means that the .45 ACP magazines hold fewer rounds. The USP and the Mark 23 only hold 12 rounds. Compared to a 9mm Glock 17 mag that holds 17 rounds, 12 is not a lot. In recent military and law enforcement studies, it has been determined that the best strategy when facing an armed threat is to fire as many rounds as possible on target. An FBI study stated that officers miss about 70 to 80% of shots during shooting incidents, as it can be incredibly difficult to shoot accurately under that amount of stress. Having more rounds in these situations has been shown to be more beneficial than having fewer, more powerful rounds. The Mark 23 is a large gun, and so is the USP. Nearing the size of an MP5K and weighing around 4 pounds with the issued accessories, it's clear why the Mark 23 is classified as an offensive weapon. Its girth helps with the recoil, and would theoretically be easier to hit targets. But you know what else reduces recoil? Having another point of contact. Rifles are easier to shoot, and have easier to control recoil due to having more points of contact to control the weapon. The rounds they fire also typically travel further than handgun rounds, and are much more effective at stopping threats. Rifle magazines also hold more than handgun magazines in their standard configuration, and with the ability to have very small rifles, it seems clear that smaller rifles would be a preferable choice to a large handgun. For a handgun, the Mark 23 SOCOM is very big. While size wasn't taken into consideration when it was designed, it remains a nuisance and seemingly a factor as to why they weren't used very much.
It's not used anymore because it was too heavy and nobody wanted to use it.
The Mark 23 SOCOM has a reputation for being incredibly reliable. During its testing, the prototypes went through an average of 6,027 rounds without a failure in a variety of harsh environments. In burning hot and freezing environments, and after a round count of 20,000 with mud and sand, the only part that required replacing was an O-ring. Given that the US Army requirement for the program was 2,000 mean rounds before failure, the Mark 23 SOCOM far surpassed these expectations. It seems to be a reliable gun, and its manufacturer, Heckler & Co., has a reputation for making reliable firearms. But there are many firearms in 2022 that are reliable and are easier to handle and use. Additionally, the testing the Mark 23 went under are extreme conditions, and are environments that few people regularly find themselves in. Granted, this handgun was designed for a community that are more likely to find themselves in these environments, but the fact remains that there are lighter and handier handguns that can survive these harsh conditions as well. And most people will be cleaning their guns before they hit 6,000 rounds. Finally, we get to the age-old debate. Is 45 ACP the best handgun ammo in the world? One thing that seems to be ignored every time this topic is brought up is that not all handgun ammo of the same type are the same. There are many different types of 45 ACP. From hollow point, full metal jacket, to whatever your local fudd loaded in his rounds, these will all produce different effects on target. However, these advances in technology also apply to smaller calibers such as 9mm. There are 9mm rounds that come very close to 45 ACP in regards to ballistic performance, and 17 rounds of hotter 9mm is preferable over 12 rounds of 45 ACP. Finally, while not relevant to military or law enforcement, 9mm is usually cheaper than 45 ACP. So in short, 45 is still effective, but 9mm is for the most part better in weight, size, and cost. It's hard to judge the Mark 23 SOCOM, because it was designed for a small group of individuals with a very specific mission in mind. Clearly, this weapon is not well suited for concealed carry or competition shooting. It was meant for special operations soldiers to quietly dispatch threats in the harsh environments these individuals operate in. The shortcomings of the Mark 23 SOCOM for these other uses is not a critique of the firearm, but rather the requirements from the US military poorly applying for other purposes such as concealed carry or competition. So are there better rounds than the 45 ACP? Yes. Is 45 still a great round? Yes. And should you try the 45 ACP in Ready or Not in real life? Yes.